All right, welcome back to this non-stop live coverage of the events that are taking place in dramatic ones, highly complicated ones in highly complicated times. That is where we are. It is, ladies and gentlemen, what it is. The world is not what we desire it to be. It is as it exists, and we have to navigate it, sometimes different in the morning, sometimes different in the afternoon, sometimes different in the evening. The Prime Minister has met with President Xi Jinping for the first time in China in 7 years. They've had a nearly hour-long conversation. A part of the opening statements were open to cameras. We heard them. The Prime Minister of India has not said that we aspire for peace and stability on the border with China. He has said that there is peace and stability on the border with China, that the special representatives have an agreement, not are going to make an agreement. And the indication that has come on two fronts. Number one, with the fact that President Xi Jinping has also suggested, and the Chinese generally avoid this topic, but has also suggested and directed that on the issue of the border progress be made, does not, of course, mean that our border disputes are going to be sorted, but it does seem to indicate to me that a political consensus, political will to the technical agreements that have been made by the special representatives during Wang Yi's visit and immediately before that the political will to keep the peace at the border exists. Would I bet my life on it? No. Should we withdraw all our troops? Absolutely not. But is it in the Chinese interest to cause a problem in the backyard with us? No. Is it in our interest? No. The second interesting thing is what has happened in the statement that the Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri has just made. He has said that on the issue of cross-border terrorism, generally it is we discuss cross-border terrorism, and by cross-border terrorism we mean terrorism into India from Pakistan. Generally we discuss it and the Chinese ignore it or give some lip service. He has said that the Chinese are helping on this issue. He hasn't said that they have assured support, they have given us assurances. He has said they are helping us on this issue, which would indicate pretty clearly to me that the Chinese have asked the Pakistanis to lock up. Now, is that going to be for several days, several weeks, several months? It's certainly not forever. But helping means that communication has happened. So, we are hoping for stability on one side and stability on the other side. So, all of us, and which is ironically in the Chinese interest, in our interest, can navigate the global economic situation, because let's face it, if the American economy is going to get stuck with this tariff shock, that's bad news for the world. It is not a zero-sum game. We want the Americans to continue growing. We want to keep growing also. Let me go straight across to my colleague Megha Sharma, who's been holding fort there for the past few days in Tianjin. Megha, I know it's been a long day. Appreciate you joining us live on this telecast. Let's just break this up, because we have a schedule tomorrow, and that's also an important one, because it's a Putin-Narendra Modi meeting. Now, that's a lot more familiar and comfortable ground for both sides. Okay, there are a lot more historicity, points of agreement on that side than you can potentially have with President Xi. But in real terms, what's the body language? What's the sort of off-camera tone and tenor that you're getting? Are we roughly satisfied that the Chinese and we are in agreement on these matters? And even though we can't trust them with our lives on it, we are expecting progress on them, not lip service.
Yes, I think the trust building measures had already started weeks ago. Remember, it was the Foreign Minister Wang Yi of China who had traveled to India less than 2 weeks ago. This was at the invitation of the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval for the special representative talks that were to happen between Wang Yi and Ajit Doval. That goes on to show that it was weeks ago discussed, perhaps even months, that what is going to be that formal chat that is going to be had between Prime Minister Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping. What is going to be the #1 agenda on the basis of which the future of India-China trade relationship, bilateral relationship and cooperation is going to be decided on? And that is the thing that was the topmost on the agenda of India, of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, when he said that there is disengagement that has happened, the border is stable, the border is tranquil, and the special representatives, the decisions that they have taken are majorly agreed by the heads of the states. So that has been the result, that the meeting between Wang Yi and NSA Ajit Doval has resulted in this formal chat that has happened, the bilateral meeting that has happened between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping. And like I said, it started off with Prime Minister saying that there is peace and tranquility along the line of actual control today. There is disengagement that happened in October, and since then there has been peace that has been restored along the border. So that's the underlining factor when it comes to envisaging any kind of a trade relationship, bilateral relationship, strategic cooperation between both the countries. And not to mention that this, whether critics may come out and say that this might just be a knee-jerk reaction of sorts because there is US pressure, Trump tariffs are being imposed on India, and therefore India is looking for greener pastures and running into the arms of China. I don't think that is true, simply because of the fact that even before tariffs were imposed, even before President Trump came to power in the United States of America as the president of the country, the thaw had already started reflecting between India and China. Remember, it was in October 2024, which was last year in Kazan during the BRICS summit on the sidelines, was the first time in 6 years that Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping met, and they had a discussion, they had a bilateral,
okay.
and this was a very opportune moment.
So
when the
okay, I mean, you can generally, and we've all done this, Megha, on the ground, you can generally get an impression whether it's gone well or gone badly. That this was the plan, and as you mentioned, it's been very carefully worked upon for several weeks, and you had the special representative talks happen, which drew a conclusion. They drew a conclusion because they were asked by their bosses to draw a conclusion. Otherwise, it will never happen. Otherwise, they're generally tasked by the Chinese to come up with nothing, okay, to continue creating problems because no agreement has happened, and hundreds of these talks have happened, by the way. We're probably at 148 or something like that. Number two, Wang Yi came to India, and generally when the heads of government are meeting in such a way, all of this is pre-decided. In fact, Narendra Modi would have traveled to China knowing full well exactly what the tone and tenor would be set. Otherwise, why would he go there? You don't go there for awkward surprises. In this regard, the Chinese are different than the Trump administration, because with Donald Trump, there's still surprises. You can land at the G20 in Canada and have a bilateral lined up, but then he's changed his mind because he says Iran, but actually he's sitting with the Pakistani military chief and having dinner. So it's a lot more confusing. For diplomats, it's a lot more difficult, especially for career diplomats. But this has been a lot more predictable. So Megha, in predictable lines, for the staff which is now preparing for the meeting with Putin, what are the expectations there?
Yes, sir. Of course, like you already mentioned, this is a more comfortable ground. We are familiar with our relationship and between our all-weather friend, which is Russia, and of course the announcement that Kremlin has already made that President Putin is going to be arriving in India in December 2025. So it's going to be an easier conversation. It's not that groundwork has not been laid for this bilateral as well, because we saw External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar was in Moscow earlier this month, and just a week before Jaishankar arrived in Moscow, there was the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, who was also in Moscow. He met the president. He also met the foreign minister Sergei Lavrov. So these communication channels have continued to stay open over the course of the 1.5 months that have transpired. Of course, the Alaska summit was taking place at the very same time when National Security Advisor Ajit Doval was over there. And of course, there were frantic phone calls that were being also made by the Ukrainian president to India, to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And it can be, I think, safely assumed that there was a conversation that was had, because at the time when the National Security Advisor Ajit Doval was in Russia, was in Moscow meeting President Putin. There was also Steve Witkoff, who's the special envoy of United States of President Trump, who had been sent to do the task of negotiating when the Alaska summit is going to take place. So you know,
all right, yeah. So it is of course it is in India's interest, global interest, that the special operation / war in Ukraine comes to an end. It's in everybody's. It's in the Ukrainian interest primarily. It's in the Russian interest primarily, because Russians and Ukrainians are the ones dying while all of us are having conversations. It is not in the interest of the American military industrial complex, because that's a market that's wiped out very rapidly. So they'll have to find a war elsewhere to spend American tax dollars from, and then get the money repatriated back to America through arms purchases. So let's hope. Donald Trump, I think, is earnest in his commitment that he wants to end this war. I think I'll give him that much, that he was right about Afghanistan, even though the manner of the circumstances under President Biden, in which the Americans left, was not the best, and that he does not think it is in America's interest to keep perpetuating wars all over the world. That makes sense. Megha, I'll thank you, and we'll pick this up tomorrow morning as the bilaterals commence with President Putin. From Tianjin, Megha Sharma reporting for us for the past couple of days. Appreciate it. Let me open up this conversation, because joining us on the broadcast, General Sudhakarji is with us as well. I can also spot, as more developments are coming my way, Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor, Jayan Krishna is joining us from CSIS, Professor Aman Agarwal is with us. So let me kick this off, and I want to specifically point out, because America is waking up, and while there is very little Western media presence at Tianjin, partly because they wouldn't want to go, partly because they are not really interested in anything but themselves, partly because maybe the Chinese didn't want them, I don't know, but there is very little American media presence in Tianjin, but they are waking up to this fact, and there is media coverage going on there, and the Americans are being told what is happening on the other side of the world while they are being sleeping. So we'll get a chance to absorb all of this as developments happen, from Fox News to New York Times, so both sides of the spectrum. But let me quickly get to Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Ambassador, so here we are, okay, it is what it is, a highly complicated, complex situation, in a place where we have a lot of tangle webs that have to be played out, but in essence, the mood, the tenor, the body language, the spoken language, the public statements, the press statements from both sides between India and China seem to be indicating that, number one, we are putting the border issue aside, no drama on the border. Okay, that's the message from the bottom and the top. Number two, when Foreign Secretary says that the Chinese are helping us in cross-border terrorism, not saying that they've assured us helping us, what's he indicating, sir?
Well, that's a very significant development. Thank you, Rishabh, and to your team, including Megha, for doing such excellent coverage of all these important meetings in different parts of the world, and for the excellent work that NewsX is doing. It was good to meet you recently. So, China has sort of currently seemingly shifted its position on various issues vis-a-vis India. But how long it will last is a matter of uncertainty. On the border, they seem to have decided not to have an aggressive posture currently, and to sort of cool down the border situation so that the focus can be elsewhere. They are, of course, facing also pressure from the US, like India is facing, because the talks are inconclusive, and every day we hear that they've agreed on something, and then after a day we hear no, they have not agreed on anything. So it's going back and forth all the time on that in terms of the tariff issue. In terms of the other relations, while Trump is there, it's not the best of situations for China or for, I guess, any other country in the world currently. Hardly any country can say that they are better off with Trump being there and the relations being better. So it's a tangled web currently for India and China at this time to move ahead and to keep the main issues on the back burner. so that they do not disrupt our dialogue on other issues is a very good step. We can see whether we can overcome the impact of the negative steps being taken by USA
Okay.
uh, in aspects of tariff, etc., by doing joint bilateral movement ahead on trade and other issues. Both are massive economies. Both are in the top few economies of the world. China is number 2, India is number 4. India is soon going to become number 3. Both have, India is the largest population in the world, number 1 population. China is number 2 population. Between these two countries, the world demography itself is impacted very significantly. Both are,
Okay.
to a great extent, self-sustaining economies. And there are so many other aspects whereby we can move ahead and have a good
Okay,
discussion.
I just want to bring it to your attention because this man has made himself very popular. There is fame and there is infamy, but you can argue which side of it is on. Peter Navarro, who has just given an interview to Fox News, where he has said, and I quote, that the court ruling is weaponized partisan injustice. So he's accused the federal court, which has said that Donald Trump cannot impose tariffs on other countries without congressional approval. He has accused the court system of being weaponized and partisan. Of course, the court system in the US is appointed by the political system. So if we happen to say that the Supreme Court at times in the US could take partisan decision based on ideological party leanings, maybe, I don't know. But this is what he has said. So he's doubling down on tariffs, and that's the feedback there. Okay, let me quickly sort of open this up because our time is limited. Jayant Krishna, how are you guys absorbing this?
I for one have always felt the need for a far greater and tighter integration of Indian economy with that of China, right? People may say that that's a country can't be trusted and so on and so forth. We have so many open border issues, geopolitical issues which are pending. But I fundamentally believe in today's day and age, if the economics works well between two countries, geopolitical stuff automatically falls in place, right? I mean, that's what I believe. COVID saw that how more and more, countries were looking at, locating their manufacturing supply chains at destinations other than China, right? I mean, at least there are additional investments not going to China, those kind of things. And India has been a forerunner. And some opportunities came our way, some investments came our way, but not to an extent it should have happened. The primary reason has been there was a very inadequate integration of our economy, our manufacturing supply chains with that of China. I've been saying that very clearly. China accounts for today almost 19% of global GDP, right? And if you go by purchasing power parity, their size of their economy is already ahead that of the US. Otherwise, they are second largest economy in the world, right? And still, the gap between our economy and Chinese economy is so huge, is almost 6 times. Chinese economy is 6 times bigger than Indian economy, right? So the only thing is we have to play our cards very well. We have to do it. We have to collaborate with them. And I somehow feel there is a far greater, in terms of manufacturing, whatever joint ventures we have or whatever investments we have from China, we have to be more open, first of all,
Okay,
for more
I'm
FDI.
sorry to interrupt you, sir, because for the past several years, the trajectory has been the exact opposite of what you're saying. The trajectory has been China +1 and India is the +1. The trajectory has been independent supply chains. The trajectory has been we have to boost our own manufacturing, and the trajectory has been that we need to do all of these things in tune with the Americans. You are now saying that the opposite is true?
Sure, past mistakes can be corrected also, right? I mean, we were very friendly to the US, right? Last 25 years, starting from Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, then Dr. Manmohan Singh, then Mr. Modi, with the 3 prime ministers and perhaps 4 presidents on their side, we have seen how relationship evolved, right? From a mere partnership to something more strategic, right? But what do we get at the end of the day? We get 50% tariff, right? And why US has not been able to levy that kind of a tariff on China is because the economic indispensability China has been able to get all over the world. some of the product lines that they have, some of the exports that they do to different countries, including that to the US.
Okay, hold your thought. I just want to educate the conversation because I've just got a copy of this morning's edition of the New York Times. Now, I know Donald Trump is not a fan of the New York Times. I am not a fan of the New York Times. Okay, but here is what it is. It is very rarely that India gets a mention in the American press because the Americans, frankly, give two hoots about anything other than themselves. And I'm being reasonable here. This is what the headline says: striking split between Trump and Modi. Then the article then goes on to say repeated public and exuberant efforts in solving the India-Pakistan conflict. It goes on to talk about what has happened in the conversation, the commentary that has taken place. It is also talking about what all disparaging comments that have taken place. Let me just quickly read this out. That Trump, who's been repeatedly saying that he has solved the military conflict between India and Pakistan, on a phone call on June 17th, which has already been referred to, he brought it up again, how proud he was to end the military escalation. He mentioned that Pakistan was going to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. The not so subtle implication, according to people familiar with the call, was that he wanted Narendra Modi to do the same. The Indian leader, we are being told Donald Trump that the US involvement had nothing to do with him. Now, and I mentioned this when the original part of this came out a couple of days ago, I can vouch for it. I've had it from as senior sources as you can possibly get in government, because I couldn't believe it. That did PM Modi tell him directly or imply that we did it ourselves? No, he told him directly, President Trump, we came to a ceasefire with the Pakistanis on a Pakistani request. You had nothing to do with it. Okay. But he's non-stop still saying that he had something to do with it, and the Pakistanis are going, we'll sure, it was all you, and it's happening. So it is a context. Now, if this is the context and is limited to it, quickly, and just for a little bit of quick perspective, just to get the larger picture into play here, sir. There is going to be damage. This is not all innocent rhetoric happening anymore. In very real terms, the American economy is going to suffer, and that's not good news for us. And we are going to have a hole in our exports, whether it's 20, 30, 40, $50 billion. Jayan Krishna, what do we do?
See, I'm at no point of time I'm saying we can ignore the US, right? I mean, the fact is we have to fast track the negotiations. We have to make sure that on the other side of the table, people who understand economics, people who understand international trade, they represent the US, and then we reach out and tell them about the kind of issues where India has not been flexible, like the dairy sector, like the farm sector, and so on and so forth, and why India is not flexible, right? We have to repel the myth that India is a tariff king, right? I mean, the weighted average of all products that we export to, that US exports to India, the weighted average of all tariff put together is just about 4.6%. Almost 50% of the products, have a tariff of less than 5% or less, right? So I think we have to keep on dialoguing with them. And the fact is, if we have to become a developed nation by the year 2047, if not earlier, right, our economy has to grow at 8.5% per annum.
Okay, so we are there.
So for that, our relationship with the US as well as China, both are equally important.
Both are important, but also the fact is that they aren't going to be doing us any favors. If you believe in the concept that global trade is a positive sum game, that everybody benefits from their specializations and efficiencies and economic advantages, we all grow. If you think it's a zero-sum game, that is either you or me, we all suffer. Okay? So I am telling you, I am not rooting for recession in America. I am not hoping that Donald Trump gets taught a lesson or his supporters get taught a lesson. No. I am hoping that America continues to be growing at a stable rate. 3-4% is great. Okay? With a reasonable inflation. Good for the American people, good for all of us. Okay? We all benefit from a strong and stable American economy. So I'm not confused about it, because if the American economy goes into recession, the American markets will crash, so will mine, so will your savings, so will your mutual funds. So it is interconnected. It is what it is. So let's change the tone and tenor of this conversation. General Sudhakar, I want you just to, on two specificities, because I know our time is limited. Number one, when the Prime Minister says, in what is pre-decided and public, that this will be in front of camera, directed of course at Xi Jinping, when he says There is peace and stability at the border. Not that there shall be, we hope there will be, we want to have. There is peace and stability at the border. When the foreign secretary comes and says that the Chinese are not assuring support but are helping us with cross-border terrorism, and cross-border terrorism is terrorism from Pakistan into India, how do we absorb these two specific statements?
Rishabh, good evening. Thank you for getting me to your show. My take on the whole issue is that India has come a long way. We need to call out what is truth. The truth is that Pakistan for infinity times has been carrying out, has done the cross-border terrorism. We need to call it out loudly and make sure that it comes out in some kind of a joint statement in the SCO meet. Otherwise, it is going to be futile. We'll be fooling ourselves. Number two, when you say they are not helping, China has to be told in simplistic, polite and firm manner that if you want to make any meaningful progress in our relationship, these are our red lines. India in no way, we are damned about the economic progress and other things, but stop this damn support or double talk about the cross-border terrorism. So the red lines have to be spelled out absolutely clearly, and also the issues which are actually of our economic interest, they need to be identified, and we need to carry out very hard bargaining negotiation, like the way we have done for the tunnel boring machine, fertilizer, as also the graphite, the rare earth graphite that
Yes.
is used for electric vehicle. So similarly, there would be many other issues. API, for example, we need to negotiate because they can't, middle of nowhere, they actually hold us and weaponize the product in such a way that our economy is held in actually in middle of nowhere. Therefore, some kind of assurance is paramount, without which we should not go ahead. Last but not the least, if you allow me, with due regards to our leadership, who have given the statement that everything is peaceful, let me remind the Indian public as also the Chinese. As on today, when the talks are going on, there are almost 50 to 60,000 troops, Chinese troops across the border towards eastern Ladakh, and we have equal number, if not more, towards our side. And towards the eastern sector, that is Sikkim and Arunachal Pradesh, if I respect my memory and the open sources, there are more than 90,000 troops towards Chinese side, unless they had carried out de-escalation and de-induction. Therefore, we need to actually flag it nice and properly and say that peace will come later. The start point, the means and methods start with de-escalation and de-induction.
No, I don't want to confuse it either. So, there is no de-escalation. Nobody is mentioning it. It is practically and physically not happening on the ground. In fact, if de-escalation was happening is when I would be deeply concerned. Because I won't trust the Chinese to be actually pushing back with the amount of infrastructure construction that they are doing. We are doing also, but they are trying to outstrip us. If we were being told that the Indian troops are returning from the LAC, then I would be concerned, because I don't think those lessons need to be taught to us ever again. We've been trying to learn them for 80 years, for God's sake. So, no, what we are saying is there is no escalation, that it has been calm for a year. And there seems to be political will, hopefully also on the Chinese side, to keep it calm. Now, like I said, would I bet my life on it? Would I bet a single square meter of the LAC on it? Absolutely not. Not a liter of Pangong Lake would I bet on the Chinese holding on to this. You cannot trust this. So, what is the saying? Trust but verify. So, sit on the ground, okay, and hold the spot. But is there a political impetus set? So, now on the second question, the Chinese are helping us with cross-border terrorism. What does that mean, Sudhakarji?
Chinese are helping us with cross-border terrorism. If this is a statement being given
Yes,
by
Vikram Misri has said this not once but twice. He hasn't said that they have assured us. He said they are helping us with cross-border terrorism, and that means that a conversation has happened with Pakistan that keep it cool for a few months.
Okay, so as I understand from your articulation, what it means is that they are helping India with regard to cross-border terrorism. That means They have acknowledged the fact that there is cross-border terrorism taking place from Pakistan side. When they make a statement like this, they are helping us. What it means is that they will take extra initiative and steps to prevail upon Pakistan or the perpetrator. If it is not Pakistan, the perpetrator who may be close to China, to extend their influence and prevent them from carrying out the cross-border terrorism. This is what I understand.
Yes, and that's roughly what I understand. Let me get Ambassador Kapoor's because he's the kind of person who would draft these words very carefully. Ambassador Kapoor, there is a marked difference, and I'm highlighting it. The Prime Minister doesn't say we aspire for peace and stability. He says we have peace and stability. The Foreign Secretary doesn't say we hope on cooperation. He said they are helping us on cross-border terrorism, and you and I know cross-border terrorism means Pakistani terrorists targeting India. So, is that something different at least than what we have gotten used to? Nice words, but nothing really.
Well, Rishabh, firstly, on the peace and stability, I think it is India's firm position and stand at various meetings, and the Chinese, sort of now being able to understand that India is not going to budge, that has brought them to this point where they have decided not to create any further difficulties for India on the border in different areas of the border. But as General Sudhakar has said, there is still massive numbers of the armies on both the sides of the border. So that is also an important step for de-escalation, because as long as the Chinese troops are present in large numbers on the border, it is a continuing threat. So it is currently under control, doesn't mean that it is going to continue for a long time or last for a long time, unless other steps are taken as a following step to the current situation of peace and stability.
Okay,
regarding the cross-border
please finish your thought, please.
It does not just pertain to Pakistan, because Bangladesh has also been very keenly instigating China in our northeastern states. They've been making very sort of strange statements about how this can become a place where China can actively sell their goods or have some control, etc. So they also have been in touch with the Chinese. Also, there are these other armies, the ethnic armies in Myanmar, who support to some extent cross-border terrorism and support also the Indian terrorists from the northeast, Ulfa and others, to seek succor and relief in their countries. So under Chinese patronage, of course. So when China says that they are, FS says that China is helping India on cross-border terrorism, it means that firstly, they are telling Pakistan that take it easy, please do not indulge in anything, particularly after what has happened in Pahalgam and the Operation Sindoor, where they got a bloody nose, and the Chinese weaponry was, proved to be not as effective as what India had in terms of its own systems. So they have asked Pakistan not to create any further disruptions, whereby they will be given a bigger hit. Secondly, they have told Bangladesh, Mohammad Yunus, not to incite and instigate China or others against India or their internal terrorists, because
that seems to be that seems to be roughly what I get out of it also. So this is, look, I don't want to overplay these things. I've been saying that since morning. Let's not overplay it. Let us take it with the pinch of salt. If you can't trust the Americans, can you now overnight trust the Chinese? Yeah, absolutely not. Okay, but is it indicative that on some matters there is a confluence of interest and we are agreeing on, and the body language, the tone, tenor, terminology, statements, the way they are happening are telling me that yes, it is slightly different, and that's the best we could hope to achieve, because all our other existential issues aren't going to go away. Breaking developments coming in, and these are meritorious to take in the middle of this conversation. This is the press secretary of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now he's he's made a statement. We'll get a chance to listen to it also. Can we hear it? Can we hear this? There's a translation at the bottom of the screen. Let's hear this.
Будем информировать. С коллегой Пашиняна Алиевым не было разговора? Нет, пока не было. Мы надеемся, что все-таки они будут иметь возможность завтра на полях заседания ШОС пересечься. Сами Алиев? Да, по крайней мере, такая возможность у них будет.
А вообще такие неожиданные встречи возможны еще двусторонние, как сегодня, с Пашинян?
Ну, как правило, они и происходят на многосторонних форматах. Лидеры предпочитают использовать такие собрания с тем, чтобы переговорить с глазу на глаз.
А как прошел прием?
Прием традиционно в максимально гостеприимной атмосфере, которую всегда обеспечивают китайские товарищи, и кухня великолепная китайская, и концерт великолепный. Поэтому атмосферу всегда наши китайские друзья создают весьма.
Okay, all right. Quickly, General Sudhakar, quickly, before Aman Agarwal has been listening very patiently. I'm coming to you immediately after this. General Sudhakar, now Russians, okay, much more comfortable meeting between Modi and Putin for sure than a Modi and Xi Jinping. There's a historicity, there is less existential issues. The Russians have their own issues with the Chinese for sure, including in the SCO and in Central Asia. But at this present moment, Vladimir Putin in Beijing immediately after meeting Trump in Alaska. Okay, this is the next high level meeting that's happened. Incidentally, the Armenians are there and others are there also, and he's having these bilaterals on the side as well. What does Vladimir Putin do next? Because nothing indicative has come out from Alaska, even though it's good at least Donald Trump was talking to him, because you can't ignore him and pretend he'll just go away. Can we look at an end to the war in Ukraine? Are we closer to it than before?
No, Rishabh. We are actually not handling the way it should be handled. You cannot talk about peace unless you have discussed or analyzed the first step, the means and method to the end state. Here the end state is peace. You're climbing the tree from the top. Can you ever climb a tree from the top? You have to climb from the bottom. The bottom step is that the ceasefire, no matter who's where, wherever they are, as is various basis, all guns must freeze. There will be no bombing, no explosive, no guns firing. Thereafter, you pull back the troops. This is the accepted norm and practices in military science to carry out any meaningful substantive ceasefire. Thereafter, you respect a particular line, call it by any name, line of control, line of actual control, or whatever name. Then you have neutral forces coming and ensuring that this holds out for eternity. Now, these are the few of the steps which are time-tested, which have proven something, providentially they have proven very good on ground at number of places, I would say, and they're holding out for good. May not be ideally, cannot be quoted. A case in point is India and Pakistan, like the way we have line of control. That's the way. It is not the best.
All right, but can we agree, General Sudhakar, that the solution was not the Biden solution either, that we will have peace summits on Ukraine without inviting the Russians? That at least Donald Trump, I think at least Donald Trump's commitment to ending the war is genuine. Okay, I think he really wants to end the war. Now, his motivation might be something else. He wants to win a Nobel Peace Prize or whatnot. But I generally think that he wants to end the war, and he's stuck in a difficult position. At least he's trying to talk to Putin. Is that a good thing?
Full marks to Donald Trump, and although I don't like many of his idiosyncrasies, but as far as stopping both the conflicts, the Central Europe as also the Middle East, I think full marks to him. But the means and methods of doing it, he has to identify, firstly understand the history. Why did Putin carry out or start the offensive on 24th of February 2022? If he has not understood this, he can never find a solution. The basic reason as to why Putin invaded Ukraine, call it special ops or whatever, for 7 days, 15 days, unfortunately it's gone beyond 3.5 years, is basically to carry out those kind of activities to prevent genocide of Russians across the Dnieper River, in Luhansk, particularly Luhansk and Donetsk. The Russians, 3.5 lakh Russians have been killed. It is to prevent from happening. That is why he had to take these steps despite having given a warning. Second point that why Putin did this is that after a number of red lines having been indicated by him, the NATO kept on expanding its the sphere of influence. James Baker was the Secretary of the United States on 9th of February 1990, if you recall. He came to Moscow, one-on-one dialogue with Mikhail Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev was very apprehensive that if you collapse the Berlin Wall and reunify both the Germany, then the sphere of influence of NATO will expand to the east. He only had given an assurance, it is there on record, that not an inch will expand. The sphere of influence will never expand to the east. That time, the number of NATO founding members being 12. At that point in time, 1990 or 19 or 17.
Yes.
Now the figure has come to 32.
Okay, but
so
but
General
Sudhakar, let's boil it down. No, there is going to be no NATO membership for Ukraine, despite the number of thousands of Ukrainians dead. There is going to be no EU membership. That's not even on the table anymore. They were sold a lemming by the Americans in that particular administration to fight a war that they should not have gotten involved with. Now, I know passions are high, and of course, if your territory is under attack, passions are high. But can you and I understand the Russian position? We can also. But what's the bottom line? Ukrainians are dying and Russians are dying. And the American military complex is getting rich off it. That's the bottom line. Okay, all right. I'm going to thank both of you. Let me go straight to Aman Agarwal, who's been listening very patiently. Appreciate that, sir. Let's come back to why all of this is happening. And that is the Indian economy. We are growing at 7.8%. We want to continue growing at 7.8%. So now you please advise us, sir, what is the SWOT analysis? What is the existential risk in the global markets because of the chaos and pandemonium coming from Washington?
You see, it's a very important question which you have asked. First thing which is most important to be understood is that the growth trajectory for India cannot be stopped or reduced by incidences like the Trump or the insurgencies or the disturbances which are happening around the globe. And this is clearly visible from the fact that COVID 2020, post-COVID 2020, India's economy is the fastest growing economy in the world. We have surpassed China, we surpassed other economies, whereas US, Europe, Japan, East Asia, China, all of these economies have been suffering a major debacle because of the excessive fiscal spending they have done during the COVID period and the year next between 2020-21, and they are not able to come out of these flavors which they have done during those periods. Even now, the Fed does not have control over the economic movements happening in the United States, and this is one of the reasons that Trump has been triggered to actually introduce more revenue generation, keep control over spendings, what are happening in the government, and bring more revenue and growth for the economy, for the Americans in particular. And that is why he is raging this tariff war or tariff inequality which their country is facing. So this should be understood that the relationships between all countries is nothing to do with trust. It is not a marriage. It is not a husband-wife relationship. It is a relationship of partnerships where partners are doing business based on contracts signed between those economies for interest of both the economies or multiple economies going towards each other and going forward for their nations. So this should be very clearly understood. I see that you have been raising this issue of trust, but there is no question of trust being hampered here in specific, because those contracts which have been signed by United States and America from time to time on different aspects, different ministries, different flavors, and not only between United States and India, but even other countries have been honored and have been going forward from time to time.
But
so
India
has been respected very well.
I have to ask you this question. Is there a risk to the US economy? Because the Americans are paying for this. We might lose some deals here and there, even though you are saying, okay, it seems to be okay right now. But the $300 billion that Donald Trump says he's going to earn out of the tariffs are $300 billion which the American consumer is paying. So is there a risk to the American economy? Because we don't want that. We want the Americans to continue growing at a reasonable rate.
So please understand one small thing, that a lot of economies across the globe, including countries like Russia, China, and even India to a great matter of fact, actually has been growing on public spending. That's when government does spending, and that's where organizations, private enterprises grow, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is, public frameworks, employment, a lot of other activities. So let us not get into the framework whether 300 billion. He's going to earn that money out of the taxes which he's going to collect from the American citizens primarily. Now, it is a question of competition for the exporters going in. And as I told you in the morning, fortunately, India is blessed with the fact that the products on which the tariffs of the tune of 50% which have been raised, most of them to the tune of about 80-85% of them are either Veblen goods or inelastic demand goods. As a result, these demands will not go down. There would be a disturbance for a quarter, but these demands will not go down in the long run. They will continue, like in the case of oil for India or cigarettes as a point. You see, irrespective of the prices, our oil consumption keeps going up. It doesn't go down. So we cannot really control what happens with oil per se, but the price has to be bought. We have to bear that price which is going for. Similarly is the case with the Americans. They will have to bear most of these products which are going to be highly indexedly priced after the tariff is there. Please understand the large chunk of the trade which is there amongst the three components is the pharmaceuticals, which have not been tariffed at all. So there are components which they feel are critical for the American economy and they have not tariffed them at all. Secondly, as you already said in your program, there are going to be congressional revolts which are going to be there in the United States, and there may be interference of the Supreme Court which can always be undertaken, which happens in a country like India as well. We are democracies. And that is something which is a beauty of a country like India as against most other countries, including China, where the growth has been robust, but on account of autocracy, where they are at times not clear. I have been invited by their Ministry of Commerce and Finance. I've addressed at the Ministry of Commerce and Finance almost about a decade back, and large amount of ministers and senior government officers clearly said they have no clarity on how do they take the economy forward at a fast pace as it had been growing in the 70s or the 80s. Now, these are complexities. Fortunately, India is blessed with the fact, and this is where the Standard & Poor's rating recently is a supporting document where an independent international agency which comes from the United States of America has been always towing the line of United States of America for the first time.
But I have to ask you the difficult questions, because before we got involved in these tariff wars with the entire world, the US versus the world, the Donald Trump 1.0 presidency was tariff wars with China. So the Chinese have seen this before. In fact, where we left off with at the beginning of COVID, January 2020, the biggest global item was Trump tariffs on China. And then we, of course, got stuck with COVID for the next several years. So why has Donald Trump gone from tariffs on China, which was the initial problem, to tariffs on everyone?
Correct. I'm very happy you asked this question. Please understand, why did WTO fail off? Kamal Nath went all the way to Latin America, had discussions, and WTO fell off. Because the subsidies were granted to agriculturists in United States and Europe, whereas they told that India must reduce, and we did reduce our subsidies to a great extent. Whereas the Americans and the Europeans did not. And that's where we saw the trade-off fall off completely, to the extent that WTO has not been able to pick up since then. It's been almost 2.5 decades since the fall of the WTO. Now, the similar case is there where the Americans have a feeling, and it is true for certain very highly priced goods, like he always talks of Harley Davidson. There is over 100%, 200%, 300% tariffs which are levied on some of these luxury goods by the government of India. And not only government of India, most economies across the globe are levying. Now, please understand, America primarily exports high-end goods, defense equipments, which people buy, countries buy, either in force, like Ukraine is being forced to buy, or willingly, like India buys as well. So please understand, they are high-end goods or very high-end technologies, AI-based, technology-based structures, or high-end, computers, supercomputers, or space equipments, or automobiles, EV structures, machineries of such nature. As a result, if there are going to be taxes, and that's where he says that when my companies want to earn, you are raising too many tariffs. And this is where his problem is coming from. And it is not for China in specific. China, in fact, has a debt burden with them. About $8 trillion worth of dues are there kept in the United States. So there is a different relationship between China and the US.
I will pick on that with in just a second. But I have to ask you. So yes, on the Harleys, yes. But unlike China, which has banned almost all of the American tech players from participating, so nobody is there, not Google, not Twitter, not Facebook, and then they've created their own multi-billion-dollar giants from WeChat and Weibo and all these. The tech majors in America benefit from the massive population and consumer base in India. And let's face it, there's a reason OpenAI wants to come to India, not because they want to build AI in India, as I'm hoping Sam Altman does, but because he sees data coming from India and a consumer base in India. So does that register? Does the soft profit making? I mean, if I'm using Adobe Photoshop and buying a license, eventually the brand is owned by an American company.
So the Indian government has the leeway to put forward and say that if you're going to be tariffing us, we are also going to be tariffing these people. Now, are we ready to put taxes on Indian citizens? Because some of these goods and services are inevitable today from a day-to-day life perspective. And if they're inevitable from a day-to-day life perspective, and that is why I say the products they have levied tariffs on are inevitable for certain group of people in the United States, and that's why they will not have so much major impact or dent on the economy. Now, this is what the government needs to undertake and see, and I think Jai Shankar and Piyush Goyal and other ministers who are in correlation with working with the United States Trade Departments will work on these issues and see where and what relief can be done.
Okay.
If you see Jack Shankar's statement, he is clear in saying that we are already working on it. There is no end to the road.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there, because I also agree that when it comes to the reciprocal tariffs, I can understand the logic that yes, you have a complaint and we can address the complaint. You want more investments in the US? Okay, let's buy more planes and more howitzers from you. Okay, can we adjust the tariffs? For sure. You mentioned Harley Davidson very specifically. On Harley Davidson, they were cut last time around. Can you cut them again? Yes, you can. The Indian consumer will benefit from this because the cars will become cheaper. The downside, of course, is that the Indian manufacturers will have to come up and cough up a little bit more. But my last question is on the larger context which you just mentioned. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there are two reasons that America, and I was mentioning this, is able to dominate financially the world. The number one reason is that they don't manufacture, but they own all the R&D, they own all the IP, all the knowledge is owned by them. So it doesn't make a difference to them who manufactures. Qualcomm has never made a chip in its life, but it gets a license on every phone sold in the world because it designs the chip. So that's how they do it, because manufacturing is a dirty business. The knowledge economy is the clean business which they have become experts at. The number two is, even if you run a trade surplus with them, okay, so let's say the Chinese earn $200-300 billion a year from the Americans, let's say hypothetically. There is no economy in the world where you can invest that money without causing a glut and hyperinflation. The only place you can put the money back is in American government bonds. So the money comes straight back to America, and yes, they have to pay a modicum of interest rate, but the money comes straight back to them. So they can run a $37 trillion deficit, which is bigger than their GDP, and not really worry about it. So on that question, Aman Agarwal, the fact that no country is big enough to take the $2 trillion in foreign exchange reserves, the $700 billion that we have, what do we do with these monies?
No, I think you're right, and you put out very frankly all the points which are relevant. And please understand one small thing. They always used to say, too big a ship, it is difficult to sink, but we have seen Titanic's ship sink multiple times. So it is not something which the US economy, there was a time when they used to say sun will never set in the Great Britain, but that has already gone away. US is only a 200-year-old economy. India is over 5,000-year-old economic framework. I think we have grown resiliently and very strongly. In my meetings at OECD, ADB, World Bank, IMF annual meetings, most of the people, industrialists, are perplexed with the fact that how does business grow in India when there is hardly any support from the government which is coming up. And these are over 2 or 3 decades I am talking about in various meetings. So this is something which need to be understood, that India's rolling wheel will not go down. It is not dependent on America. We are a self-sufficient economy. We, at the time of independence, were 99% importing country. Our rupee was stronger than a dollar. Today, our rupee has gone down to 85, 86, 88 rupees a dollar. But we are a self-sufficient country in all forms. Even if the borders are locked for all purposes, India will survive and grow strongly. Because of the domestic demand,
I agree with you, but
okay,
but I don't want to suggest that either you or I are recommending let's shut our borders, but I agree with you Can you threaten us and think that we will collapse? The answer is absolutely not. That's not going to happen. But we don't want to stave off collapse. We want to continue growing at 7 to 8%. That's where we want to be. Okay, maybe a little bit more than that would be nice, but I don't want to be greedy. That will be great. And if you manage to achieve just that over the next few months, in the chaos and turmoil it is, ladies and gentlemen, it is not in our interest to see the US economy go into recession. It is not in our interest to celebrate economic problems in China either. Okay? Neither is it in our interest to have an FTA with China, because we can't simply, their manufacturing capacity is so large that they sell at below manufacturing cost. They will destroy you with nothing left. There will be nothing left. Your industry will just shut down, because if you're selling at below cost price, that's what dumping is called. How does your local industry survive? So there's a long road traveled. We want the Chinese to do well. Okay, we want the Americans to do well, and we want to have space to do well. And you heard the Prime Minister that while he was sitting in Tianjin, a recorded Man Ki Baat was playing today. We will have to figure out Swadeshi. We've talked about Atmanirbhar Bharat. We've talked about this before. We have to get it. Good news is the first made in India lithium batteries are coming. The first made in India semiconductor chips are coming. And I'll leave it with this thought. Take this mobile phone. Okay, I'm holding in my hand. This is a Korean mobile phone. It's Samsung. Now, we say we are manufacturing the most amount of mobile phones in the world. That's not entirely true, because we assemble them. So, you take the mobile phone and strip it of its components. The most important components is not the metal bit. It's the screen, it's the chipsets, which include the communication chips, and it's the battery. Okay. Cameras and all are doable, but those are the three critical components. We don't manufacture the screens that Samsung does. We don't manufacture the lithium batteries, okay, and we don't manufacture the chipsets. So, if you distill it, now if you take the battery, if you want to make a lithium battery, you need to find lithium. Are we saying there's no lithium in India? No, there is. They found it in Chhattisgarh. And where does China have all its lithium? It has it in Xinjiang, which borders what? It borders Ladakh. Now, we can argue that do you want to mine in Ladakh or not? That's a separate argument. But can you find the lithium? Yes. So, if we build it base up, then we can say it's a made in India phone, okay, not an assembled in India phone. That's where we want to be. And happy to hear the semiconductor chips up, our factories are coming up rapidly. So, is it changing? Yes, it is. Do we want to change faster? Yes, it is. And that's on us. Okay, that's totally on us. I thank Aman Agarwal both for his patience and for his very intelligent interjections into this conversation. Appreciate it. So, good night to you. We take a break. See you in a minute.